For this first video in our JavaScript series, we're going to cover some fundamental basic concepts when using JavaScript in the Power Platform. Now, in the Power Platform, JavaScript is a way to apply business logic to the user experience. This usually takes the shape of showing and hiding things on forms, but it can also be more advanced, like pre-populating fields from other tables based on some value on the form. One of the main questions is, why JavaScript? Now, there are certain circumstances where you won't need JavaScript. And I'll give you a simple example. On this form, there's a section that is hidden by default named Government. It has a few fields relevant to the government sector that are just not applicable in the private sector. So unless the org type is equal to government, we want to hide that entire section. But if the org type is government, we want to show that section. Now, in Power Platform, there's a non-coding sort of front-end wrapper for JavaScript. They call it business rules. It's possible to use business rules to hide and show fields based on some logic, and if you hide all the fields in a section, the entire section is hidden. Now, we've done that just using a business rule. Let me just demonstrate that. So you can see how the government section appears when I set the org type to government, and here is the actual business rule. And as you can see, there's no code. It's very visual. There's some simple conditional logic to show and hide those fields, which then hides the section. But this video is not about business rules. It's about JavaScript. So what if I needed to hide an entire tab conditionally? Well, at least as of right now, business rules do not support hiding a tab. And therefore, this is an example when I would need JavaScript. And I just want to say, I don't think the need for JavaScript's going anywhere. I mean, I work every day on multiple Power Platform projects, small, medium, enterprise level, and they all require JavaScript at one time or another. And so for this reason, I really encourage you to spend a little bit of time learning at least the basics, and then you can go from there, because you can do a lot with JavaScript. So let's first have a look at the code to simply hide a tab. And then once we've walked through that code, we'll go ahead and deploy the script to the form and we'll test it. And along the way, I'll also discuss here and there a couple of best practices for your coding. So here we have a very simple JavaScript function that conditionally hides and shows a tab on the form. Now, as you can see, I recommend adding some setup information on the top of your script so you can have all the values when you begin to write. In fact, I also like to add the actual business case, which in this case is to show the tab when the value of a field named BF status is either of these three, and then hide the tab for all other conditions. Now, what you'll also see is we have a schema name for the option set. We have the value of each option, which is a helpful reference. And then it's also helpful to know the schema name of the tab itself. It's good to collect this information, put it in a comment at the top of your script so you have it when you begin to code. Now let's go line through this very simple JavaScript code. First thing I just want to mention is a little bit of best practice. This is a little bit controversial, or I should say not everybody completely agrees with this, but you'll notice that I like to use a try and a catch in the script. Now, the reason I generally recommend this is because I know that it won't always eliminate all errors for the end user, but it will eliminate many of them, and it sort of separates the error handling from the platform and from your code in a way. And so, those errors that are not shown to the user when you're troubleshooting can be shown in the console. And you can use F12 to look at that. Also, the other thing that I like to do is use the console command to show values in the console. Now, again, this is also something that not everybody likes to do because they don't like to expose their code to the end user. I find it quite useful. Anyway, at least I find it useful during the troubleshooting period. And you'll see this reference, and then we'll go show that later on, how it shows that value. Okay, so let's go through this code. When we write JavaScript using the modern API for the Power Platform, the first thing we need to do is obtain what's known as the execution context. Without going into too much detail, this pretty much allows you to use the actual API, and it's a pretty robust JavaScript API. It allows you to make certain calls. And within that execution context, there are other contexts, sort of subcontexts, if you will. And one of them is form context. So this is what we use to show and hide tabs, fields, and perform various actions on the form. So you can see here, this first line loads up the form context into our variable that we call form context. And then that allows us to use methods that you'll see below in the script. Now, in addition to that variable, we also set some other variables for various components that we need in our script. For instance, the variable bfStatus. That stores the value that is presently in the database for that field. You can see that we use a getValue call from form context to obtain that value and set it to our variable. And finally, we use some form context calls to set a variable for the tab itself so we can hide and show the tab easily. Now, the conditional logic is fairly straightforward. We have an if statement that checks the value of bfStatus, and we use these OR conditions, that's the double pipe, to cover the three statuses that would cause us to show that tab. And then finally, we have an else statement that hides the tab under all other conditions. And then at the end, we have our catch statement that catches the errors. And finally, we close out the function at the bottom. Now, I'll be sure to paste this code actually right into the description of this video, so you can use it as a sort of template for your basic JavaScript functions. One of the other things that I recommend as sort of a best practice, or at least something that will just make your life easier, is a validation service. My personal favorite validation service for JavaScript, and I believe they have other other platforms that they validate against, but anyway, is Esprima. What I like about Esprima is it's no nonsense. You don't have to sign up. They don't want your email address. They don't spam you. They don't even know who you are. It's completely anonymous. It's very useful. It gives us some nice information. All you do is you just copy your code into the system, and if it's syntactically okay, then you'll get back all green, and if there's an issue, you'll get back red, and it'll tell you where the issue is, and it'll help you troubleshoot your code. Now, just to be clear, this validation service is pure JavaScript. It has nothing to do with the Power Platform. So you might make errors in your code in the Power Platform that are not specific to JavaScript. So your JavaScript might pass, and your code might still fail, but at least you'll be starting with code that's syntactically correct from the perspective of JavaScript. So that's where you use a service to make sure that at least your code is operating correctly, so you can eliminate that possibility. Then, of course, you might have logical errors or something like that that you have to deal with yourself. Okay. So now we have our script. Now let's go deploy and test it.